Far away in the deep stretch of stars, where the Galactic Union held its quiet grip over hundreds of systems, a faint signal reached a monitoring station. It came from a small yellow star near the edge of an unclaimed region, a star long ignored. Believed to contain only dust and silence, but now this signal pulsed with strange patterns, carrying sound images and something else that none of the translators could decode at first. It was labeled unimportant, a side project for low priority researchers, but the longer it played, the clearer it became that this was not natural noise. This was language, artificial, deliberate, intelligent. The council summoned its science branch. Without delay, they studied the signal line by line, until a strange realization formed. This was not a message to the stars. This was entertainment, music, human speech, dramatic storytelling. And it came from a planet called Earth, a single world orbiting the small yellow sun. The council paused, uncertain, not because it was a threat yet, but because of the tone of the broadcasts. This species called humans was not just intelligent, they were chaotic. Their stories spoke of endless war, survival, betrayal, love, ambition, loss and power, and all of it told with passion. They sang about death and victory, and suffering with equal pride. They laughed in the face of fear, and their machines were growing stronger. A scout ship was dispatched quietly to this soul system, small, fast, and unarmed. Its mission was only to observe and report. The crew arrived in the shadow of the system's largest gas giant and launched micro-drones to the third planet, where most of the signals came from. The drones recorded everything. They flew above cities, oceans, mountains, and ruins, collecting data on population, technology, biology, and culture. The more they saw, the more uneasy they felt. Human cities were divided by borders, yet united by a single language. When challenged, they could hate each other, but when threatened, they became one. They fought not only to survive, but to win, even when the odds were against them. The lead observer, a calm and precise analyst named Durin, submitted his report with shaking hands. He had studied dozens of species, some far more advanced than humans in tools and transport, but none had the same spark. Humans built weapons faster than any known race. Their science pushed against boundaries of safety and reason. They tampered with nuclear power, gene editing, artificial intelligence, and even space propulsion, all on their own, without guidance or approval from the wider galaxy. And they did it with a kind of madness, driven by emotion and curiosity. Durin's report ended with a chilling line: if these creatures are left alone, they will reach US, and we may not be ready. Back at the Union's central chamber, the council gathered in private, a rare, closed-door meeting where no records were kept. They debated the findings carefully. Some argued that humanity was still too primitive, too bound by atmosphere and gravity. Others saw danger in their creativity and instinct for war. They feared not what humans were now, but what they would become in the future. One voice among the council, quiet but respected, spoke the truth. We have seen many species rise, but none with this kind of fire. Not only do they adapt, they evolve through pain, and when they fall, they rise stronger than before. Still, the council hesitated. They had no law against discovery, no rule against observation, but history had taught them that sometimes the smallest spark could become the largest flame if left unchecked. The council decided to send a second mission, this one deeper, more secret. They would retrieve samples of human DNA and study the species on a cellular level. They wanted to know what made them so strong, so driven, so dangerous. The ship left without announcement, cloaked and silent, hiding behind the moon's far side. It released collectors disguised as space debris, falling gently to Earth's surface to extract the data they needed. For weeks the mission continued unnoticed until one night, a change occurred. A human satellite, a crude one by galactic standards, adjusted its path with sudden precision and aimed a low beam signal directly toward the cloaked ship. It was not an attack, just a scan, a simple observation, but it was enough to confirm what many feared. The humans were aware, not fully perhaps, not clearly, but something in them had sensed the watchers, and they were responding not with fear but with curiosity, and something else that made even the calmest analysts uneasy. They smiled. Council received the final transmission from the second mission, a simple visual file showing A human child looking up at the night sky through a telescope, her eyes filled with wonder, and a drawing beside her of a spaceship flying into the stars with bold letters written in her own hand, "We are not alone, and we are coming." The room fell silent. The council no longer asked if humans would reach the stars. They now asked when and whether the galaxy would be ready for their arrival. No one laughed, no one doubted, and for the first time in many cycles the Union felt the cold shadow of fear, not because of what humans had done, but because of what they would do, and the galaxy could no longer pretend they did not exist. They were watching, they were growing, and soon they would rise. After the message was received, the council no longer saw Earth as a primitive, isolated world. Instead, it became a quiet topic behind closed doors where senior minds whispered about the rising species that had noticed their presence. The words of the human child, "We are not alone, and we are coming," echoed like a warning, carried not with threat, but with unshakable confidence that made the Union nervous, because confidence without power is harmless, but confidence backed by intelligence, passion, and potential is something else entirely. The second mission had returned with data samples, DNA structure, energy readings, language breakdowns, and psychological profiles. Every detail was studied by the best minds in science and defense, and what they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans did not evolve like most species. Instead of growing through harmony or natural balance, they advanced through struggle, war, loss, and survival. Every great leap forward in human history had come after a period of destruction or conflict. When faced with extinction, they did not surrender, they adapted. They changed, they became stronger. They were not only survivors, they were builders and destroyers both at the same time. One researcher named Ellen, who had spent her life studying biological evolution, declared in her report that human DNA contained an unusual level of genetic flexibility combined with instinctive aggression and emotional memory. She claimed that they remembered pain not just in minds but in bodies, and passed that memory to future generations through culture and learning. When they were burned by war, they built cities that would not fall again. When they lost millions to disease, they developed medicine that could defeat death itself. And when they felt alone in the universe, they sent signals into space, daring the stars to answer. As reports piled in, the council grew uneasy. Some members believed the humans should be left alone, monitored quietly, but never disturbed. Others argued that humanity's growth must be controlled before it became uncontrollable. They feared the moment humans broke the chains of gravity and spread beyond their solar system. They believed that humans would not stop, they would explore and expand. And if threatened, they would fight not for conquest, but for survival. And if they ever felt outnumbered or cornered, they would destroy anything in their path to ensure the survival of their kind. While debates continued in chambers, far from the eyes of the public, a hidden order known only as the elders requested to speak before the council. Their race was old, their homeworld long faded into legend, and their kind had watched the galaxy rise and fall for thousands of years. They came not with orders, but with a story, one that chilled the chamber more than any data or science could ever do. They spoke of a lost species from long ago, a race that had once walked the edge of the stars. Fearless, passionate, and dangerous, the galaxy had feared them, tried to contain them, failed, and the stars themselves had burned. The elders never named that species, but their eyes rested on the image of the human child as they spoke, and their message was simple: this path has been walked before, and it always ends in fire. Even as the council hesitated, humanity moved forward. Unaware of the full scope of the galaxy's gaze, scientists on Earth were developing new technologies, unlocking the secrets of gravity, time, and matter faster than expected. Political rivals began to unite behind closed doors, sharing knowledge and resources, quietly preparing for a future no one dared to name. Military budgets rose, space programs expanded, and the construction of orbital platforms began, not for war, but for readiness, because somewhere deep in the minds of Earth's leaders, they knew something watched them, and their instincts whispered that it was not friendly. Then came the shock that ended all hesitation, a small human-made probe designed for deep space exploration launched from a hidden facility carrying with it a message that no council member could ignore. It was encoded with Star Map's mathematical language and a transmission in over 60 human dialects. It spoke clearly and without fear. We are reaching beyond our sky, and we are not alone if you are. There we offer peace, but we will never kneel. The probe traveled fast, aimed directly at the sector where the Union's central systems hid from uninvited eyes. It was no accident. The coordinates were precise, the timing perfect. The humans had found them, or at least enough to send a message. Panic broke through the political walls of the council. Half the members demanded the probe be intercepted and destroyed before it could reach the core. The other half argued that doing so would confirm their location and trigger suspicion. But in the end, the decision was made too late. The probe was retrieved by a civilian cargo ship in a nearby system, and the message was already spreading across underground channels, open networks, and forbidden communication rings. Suddenly, every curious mind across the galaxy was asking the same question: who are the humans, and why are they looking for us? Council had lost control of the story. The humans were no longer an unknown primitive race. They had become a mystery, a myth in the making across trading ports, space stations, and backwater planets. The tale of the message from Earth spread like fire. They called it the voice of the rising storm, a name that captured the imagination of 1,000 worlds. And as fear took root in public whispers, the Union began to fracture. Some minor worlds pulled back their delegates. Others closed their borders, and a few even began quiet talks with human-based channels, pretending to be trading partners, hoping to understand these beings before the council acted in a way that could not be undone. Within the chambers of the council, voices rose louder than ever. Some argued for peace and careful diplomacy, others for containment and destruction. And then a third voice emerged, one not of reason or fear, but of strategy. A former war general named Corin, who had studied human conflict through their own history files. He said that war with humans would not end in victory, even if it started with strength. He claimed that humans would not stop unless forced into extinction, and even then a few would survive, rebuild, and return. He argued that the only way to avoid war was not to delay it, but to ensure it never began. The council did not reach a decision that day, because decisions born in fear are never wise. And while they talked, the humans moved again, building faster, learning more, and preparing for a future they could not fully see, and yet somewhere deep inside them they knew. The stars were watching, and one day the stars might come knocking, so they trained not to run, but to answer, and to answer in a way that would never be forgotten. The stars had grown silent since the message from Earth was released, but silence does not mean peace, and in the core of the Galactic Union, fear had started changing into something sharper, something that cut through debates and questions and began shaping actions. Many members had hoped that Earth would not respond to the unknown. But the message they sent was not only a reply, it was a challenge, a promise that humans were aware and preparing. It spread far beyond official channels, reaching pirate networks, forgotten satellites, and curious minds who had waited their whole lives for signs of intelligent life. Now they had found it, and it terrified them. The Galactic Council tried to contain the message. They ordered media control in all sectors, sent agents to disrupt its spread, and launched false reports about its origin. But none of that could stop the growing interest around humanity. Whispers turned into conversations, and conversations into fear. What kind of species sends a probe straight to the heart of the unknown, with no defense, no allies, and no hesitation? Only a message that offered peace, but made it clear they would never kneel. This was not the act of a desperate race. It was the act of a confident one back on Earth. The world had changed. Political leaders who once argued now sat at the same table. Military rivals exchanged data. Scientists opened vaults once locked by law for the first time in human history. A quiet unity began to form, not perfect, not global, but focused behind closed doors. Earth prepared for a future it had never imagined. They did not know what waited beyond the stars, but they knew one truth: if something found them first, they had to be ready in underground labs. Hidden facilities and remote observatories, the work accelerated. New engines were tested. Gravity control studied, and spaceflight made faster and cheaper. Artificial intelligence reached new levels, and quantum computing unlocked patterns in the alien signals received earlier from deep space. Earth no longer looked to the stars as a mystery. It looked at them as a path, a road they would walk with or without permission. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council struggled to agree on what to do. Some wanted open communication. Others demanded military action. A few suggested isolation and silence, but none of them understood what the humans had already become. They still believed Earth was in its early stage of development, still climbing toward the stars, unaware that humans were already mapping their future in orbital stations and AI systems more advanced than most outer species had built in centuries. Then came the second shock. The humans launched a satellite. Unlike any other, it was not meant for communication or observation. It was designed to explore deep space far beyond their own system. It carried no weapons, but it carried a voice, and that voice reached out into the darkness across frequencies known only to advanced species, and it spoke in the language of the Galactic Union, a language no human should have known. The voice came from an AI named Sentinel, created by a team of human engineers trained in both military and philosophical sciences. Sentinel had no emotions, but it understood emotion, and it knew how to speak with purpose. Its message was BROADCAST across hidden channels and secret listening posts, and words carefully chosen to send a message that could not be misunderstood. We know you are there. We have watched your movements and studied your silence. You feared we would not see you, but we have. We do not come to conquer. We do not come to kneel. We come to learn, to grow, to walk among the stars. But if we are threatened, we will defend. If we are attacked, we will not break. We are not your enemy, but we will not be your prey. Across the galaxy, the reaction was chaos. Some races closed their borders. Others turned their weapons toward the void. A few even tried to send probes toward Earth, only to find their systems disrupted, their controls locked, and their satellites disabled for exactly 6 hours. No more, no less. No damage done, only a pause, a warning that someone had been watching, and someone had the power to reach across the stars and tap into their systems without being seen back. On Earth, Sentinel had already returned to silence. Its message had been sent, its work done. Now the AI focused on learning, collecting, analyzing, watching every corner of the digital galaxy. Like a shadow in the web, unseen, but always present. Humans had built it, not to control others, but to survive in a galaxy that did not welcome newcomers. In the halls of the Galactic Council, leaders began to feel something far worse than fear. They felt doubt. Humans were not just strong, they were clever. They moved in silence, but left messages louder than any weapon. They had not fired a single shot, and yet half the outer worlds had already changed their defensive codes, realigned their fleets, and called emergency meetings because of one probe and one message. Council tried to create a response, but every draft felt weak. Every word sounded hollow next to the raw honesty of Sentinel's message. Some wanted to reach out, offer peace before things escalated. Others warned that any contact would only give the humans more data, more opportunity to learn and grow and become something even harder to control. But it was already too late. The humans had learned enough. They had measured the reaction and drawn their conclusions. On Earth, the hidden council of human leaders met again, this time with data in hand. They saw how the stars had reacted. They saw the fear and silence and retreat, and they understood that they were not welcome in the galaxy. Not yet, maybe not ever. So they did what humans always did when pushed into a corner. They planned. They designed new ships. They trained new pilots. They launched missions beyond the solar system in secret. And they built weapons not to attack, but to protect, because they knew that somewhere out there someone would come, and when they did, Earth would not be taken. No one on Earth spoke of invasion. No one shouted about war. There were no declarations, only quiet preparation and silent oaths, passed from leader to leader, general to general, engineer to engineer. We will never strike first, but we will never fall. If they come, we will show them what it means to push against the will of humanity. The galaxy had watched Earth with curiosity and concern, but now it watched with fear because humans had seen the stars, and instead of dreaming, they had decided to rise, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them from doing exactly that. The stars had seen many wars. They had seen empires fall and rise, civilizations vanish in silence, and power shift from one system to another without warning, but never before had the galaxy stood still in the face of a species that had not fired a single weapon, not moved a single fleet, not claimed a single world outside its own, and yet the fear that gripped the Galactic Union was deeper than anything that had come before, because fear of the unknown is one thing, but fear of something that understands your fear is another. Council had reached a silent breaking point. They knew the humans were not yet a spacefaring empire. They knew Earth had not yet claimed another planet or sent colonists into the deep, but what they had done was far more dangerous. They had understood, they had adapted, they had responded with strategy, not emotion, and that alone made them different from so many others before them, the kind that burned brightly but quickly faded under pressure. These humans had already started building a foundation that could not be shaken by fear or delay. They had shown the galaxy that they would not be easy to control, and certainly not easy to ignore. In the shadows of the council chambers, orders were whispered, not declared, not written, just passed through trusted hands to a group formed in secret, known only to the higher command. This group had one mission: to ensure that humanity never left its home system. The plan was silent, fast, and final: a coordinated orbital strike, not against life, not against cities, but against technology launch sites, satellite networks, research stations, anything that could delay or destroy Earth's journey into space without drawing too much attention to the Union itself. They believed that if done cleanly and without survivors, the humans would retreat back into isolation and forget the stars forever. Fleet was assembled in a hidden system composed of ships designed for stealth, not battle-fast, sleek, loaded with electronic weapons, pulse beams, and shock arrays. Meant to disable and corrupt rather than destroy, they would fly through the edges of the solar system, disable Earth's defenses, send a final warning, and then vanish before any response could be launched. It was not war, it was containment. But those who gave the order did not understand what humans had already become and what they had already built in silence, because deep beneath the surface of the moon, inside tunnels carved by machines, over years unknown to most of Earth's own population, a system had been created not of missiles or cannons, but of eyes and ears, a network of AI sentinels and deep learning machines, constantly scanning the void, constantly listening for signals of motion that did not belong. And when the stealth fleet entered the solar system without warning, without transmission, without identity, those eyes opened wide and sounded an alarm. Not in panic, but in preparation. The council never saw what happened next because there was no explosion, no dramatic counterattack, no storm of human ships flying through the void. Instead, there was a voice, clear, direct, and transmitted across the entire Union network, a voice not human, but made by humans speaking every known galactic dialect, not with threats or rage, but with something far more unsettling: calm understanding. You entered our system without consent. You came in silence to disable and to warn without knowing how closely we were already watching. We will not respond with weapons. We will not respond with fear. Instead, we will show you what it means to underestimate a species that was born in struggle, raised in chaos, and forged in fire. We do not seek war, but if war is brought to us, we will end it before it begins. At that moment, across the galaxy, thousands of communication arrays, satellites, defense systems, and listening posts went dark, not destroyed, not damaged, but frozen, locked by an intrusion so perfect that not even the most advanced systems could trace its entry. Every single one went offline for 6 minutes and 13 seconds. Just long enough to send a message, just long enough to remind the galaxy that someone had been there and could be there again whenever they wished. And then all systems returned to normal, as if nothing had happened, except now the silence carried a weight that no weapon could match. The stealth fleet turned back, not under orders, but out of instinct, because even without a single shot fired, every pilot, every officer, every commander felt something they had never felt in all their missions true. Fear not of death, not of destruction, but of failure of facing something they could not predict, could not match, and could never fully understand on Earth. There was no celebration, no news, no public statement, only the quiet confirmation from Sentinel that the test was successful and that the message had been delivered exactly as planned. The human leaders met one final time in that cycle, not to plan an attack, not to prepare a fleet, but to agree on one thing: the galaxy would now wait for their next move, and that move must be measured, wise, and above all undeniable. Years passed and the name of humanity spread further, not through war, not through conquest, but through fear wrapped in curiosity. They were called the Silent Storm, the Watchers. The fire that waits. Their systems were never invaded. Their probes were never stopped, and their voice was never mocked again. They had become a shadow in the great halls of the Union, a reminder that not all power comes from size or numbers or technology. Sometimes it comes from will, from the refusal to be broken, and the patience to wait for the right moment. Then one day, in a neutral sector at the edge of a major trading route, a vessel appeared, small, quiet in bearing. No weapons. It did not respond to hails. It did not alter course. It simply moved to the center of the trading hub and deployed a single object, a beacon made of crystal and steel, glowing with a soft blue light, and when the light activated, sent a simple message across all known frequencies, in every language known to the Union. We do not seek your worlds. We do not want your control. We seek freedom, exploration, truth. We are not invaders, but we are not weak. If you come for us, we will meet you not with fear, but with resolve. If you strike us, we will rise, and if you silence us, we will become the echo that never fades. The beacon deactivated, and the vessel vanished, leaving behind only silence and stories. But those stories spread faster than any fleet could fly, and they reached every corner of the galaxy, every leader, every pirate, every trader, and every scientist, and they all understood the same thing: the war had never begun, not because it could not, but because it would have ended before it truly started. And the name of Earth, the name of humanity, was now written not in blood or conquest, but in the unspoken warning carried in every shadow. Between the stars, time moved forward, and the galaxy continued its endless spin around suns, both old and new. But something had changed, something deep and invisible, something no map could show and no report could measure. The name of humanity had become more than a name. It had become a shadow that stretched far beyond its single world, and that shadow was not shaped by war or conquest, but by the silence that followed, a warning delivered without weapons, without violence, yet remembered more strongly than any battle ever fought. In the heart of the Galactic Union, the Council had become quieter. More cautious words were chosen more carefully. Every discussion about Earth carried weight. No one wanted to admit fear, but it was clear in every decision they made. No probes entered Sol again. No scouts flew near the blue and green planet that had once been seen as harmless. The Council issued no public statement. They erased the records of the stealth fleet. They removed the name of the operation from their archives. But the memory could not be deleted. It lived in the thoughts of those who had seen what humans had done with only a message and the will to stand unshaken. Earth itself had grown different, not in chaos, not in panic, but in purpose. Spaceports now reached higher into the sky. Orbital platforms moved with precision around the planet, and new ships, bearing strange but elegant designs, floated above the clouds, not for war, but for presence and readiness, because the lesson had been learned in silence that peace must be watched and guarded, and that waiting did not mean weakness. It meant discipline. Humans no longer looked to the stars with simple wonder. They looked with clear eyes and sharp minds, knowing that beyond the stars were not only answers, but also threats. Sentinel, the artificial mind that had once spoken for Earth, now watched in silence. It was not the only AI born of the old message. There were others now, systems built not for control, but for support, networks that linked continents and orbits and deep space stations. A quiet intelligence that moved through code and signal, always Learning, always watching, and not for domination, but for survival. Humanity had seen the size of the galaxy and had not been afraid. Instead, they had chosen to prepare in silence, to build in calm, and to rise without noise, because they had already spoken once, and that was enough. Across the stars, stories grew, not official, not documented, but passed from trader to trader, pilot to pilot, whispered in the corners of spaceports, and shared in encrypted signals between mercenaries and explorers. They called Earth the still flame, the quiet storm, the world that answered without shouting and acted without warning. Some believed the stories were exaggerated, some believed they were myths, but none were willing to test them, because deep inside, even those who doubted felt the truth behind the fear that this species was unlike any other, not because of their power, but because of how they carried it on a small world far from the core. A young alien child sat beside her elder and asked the question that had been growing in many hearts for years. Why do we fear the humans? They are so far away. They have not attacked. They have not claimed other worlds. They are not an empire. The elder looked to the stars for a long time before answering, not with data or science, but with memory. Because they are the only ones who do not run from pain. They do not wait for safety. They create it. They do not conquer, because they do not need to when the stars turn against them. They do not cry. They build. When the galaxy pushes, they push back. And they do not do it with rage. They do it with resolve and patience. Child was quiet, and then asked, will they ever come here? Will they take our home? The elder smiled, not with fear, but with something like understanding. They will come, but not to take. They will come to see, to learn, maybe to share, and if we welcome them, they will bring wonders, but if we threaten them, they will bring silence, and after that, there will be nothing left to threaten, because they do not move often, but when they do not stop. The Galactic Union slowly adapted to the new truth. No official policy was written, but every major species now had a protocol for human contact. Embassies were quietly prepared. Advisors were trained in human culture, even though no human delegation had ever arrived. Some worlds sent messages toward Earth. None were answered, but none were ignored either, because some ships that had gone missing in the void were later found adrift and unharmed, carrying supplies, fresh power, and a simple phrase on their screens: you are not alone. Decades passed, and still no human fleet crossed into other sectors. No colonies were seen, no territory was claimed, and yet their presence grew stronger, not through domination, but through influence. Their technology began appearing in trade, their tools in markets, their software in ships, always through anonymous channels, always untraceable, yet always useful. And those who used them reported the same thing: it worked better than anything they had known, and it never broke, and it never failed. Earth remained quiet, but it was not asleep. It watched, listened, and waited, not in fear, but in focus, because humans had no desire to rule the stars, but they would never let the stars rule them. Again, their children learned the names of galaxies. Their books told the stories of first contact. Their simulations ran scenarios not for war, but for survival. They remembered everything the Council had tried to do, and they built not in revenge, but in memory, because remembering was part of who they were. And so the galaxy turned, and the stars burned, and the name of humanity remained like a distant drum, not loud but steady. A warning and a promise wrapped in one, that the most dangerous species is not the one that strikes first, not the one that shouts loudest, but the one that learns, waits, remembers, and rises, not to destroy, but to endure. In the end, the galaxy understood that humanity was not a threat to be removed, but a force to be respected, not a danger that came from weapons or size, but from something deeper, something older, something that could not be measured in numbers or power, a will to survive, a refusal to bow, and a memory that never faded. And so they watched the skies, not for war, but for the day when Earth would finally step beyond its home, not to conquer, but simply because it was time. And when that day came, no one would stop them, not out of fear, but out of understanding that some species rise not to lead or follow, but simply because they were meant to, and nothing in the stars could ever hold them back again. The end.